The Kursk disgrace of Russia continues. For half a year now, Moscow has been unable to regain control over its own territories, even though, according to their reports, they've already destroyed the Ukrainian armed forces and all NATO armies 15 times over. In the Kursk region alone, they've supposedly eliminated more French mercenaries than the entire population of France.
Oh, what a nightmare. Oh.
In reality, the only thing the Russian army manages to do effectively is destroy its own cities and its own citizens. The latest crime by the orcs shocked even the orcs themselves. Russian aviation has started intense carpet bombing in the Suja region.
They need to be surrounded and everything destroyed. Just carpet bombing, you understand? It's not for nothing, by the way. I hope they're preparing for this, because there's a reason for so much evacuation.
Let's not.
Otherwise, why evacuate thousands of people?
After yet another air raid, one of the bombs hit a boarding school where local civilians, elderly people and children were hiding. Dozens of people were trapped under the rubble.
A devastating aerial bomb reportedly fell on the boarding school in occupied Suja last night. Dozens of people, elderly, helpless, immobile women, and children, more than 90 people in total, were trapped under the rubble. According to the Ukrainian side, 4 people were killed and another 4 were seriously injured. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine accused Russia of carrying out the strike. According to the Ukrainian military, the civilians who were in the boarding school were preparing to evacuate.
The strike on the boarding school was clearly not accidental at all, because it was in fact hit again during the rescue operation.
Pain moans and anguished cries of people can be heard from beneath the rubble. Let me remind you that most of these people are elderly and bedridden. Search and rescue operations are currently being carried out by the military commandant's office.
As usual, propaganda immediately started screaming that the Ukrainians bombed themselves. Just like in Mariupol, remember? The city was completely surrounded. Aviation was bombing it around the clock. Ukrainians hit drama theater, residential buildings. Why? Ask the Spanish air traffic controller.
Well, because... just... because...
In response, the Ukrainian General Staff published a map showing the flight path of the guided aerial bomb. Kyiv insists it was launched from territory controlled by Moscow, by Russian tactical aviation. It was already known that there were civilians in the boarding school building. For example, the relatives of the Suja residents had spoken about this.
The Russians of the Kursk region have experienced firsthand exactly what it's like when the Russian army supposedly comes to liberate you.
Why does this enemy resistance center in Suja keep operating? Yes, there are civilians there. Yes, that's what I was told. There are 200 civilians there. But to keep them from getting hurt, are we supposed to sacrifice 20,000? In reality, the battles for Suja will be extremely costly without something like this. So why isn't a decapitating strike like that being carried out? It would be worth solving these riddles.
Liberation, Russian style, means the total destruction of everything. And it doesn't matter who gets leveled to the ground, their own citizens or someone else's. On TV, they'll justify everything and say that's how it was supposed to be. Although in Donbass, after the so-called liberation, even the most die-hard loyalists started to see the truth.
And when you see this barren lunar landscape, you realize what's left of these newly conquered territories of Russia. What are you supposed to do with that afterwards? And let me remind you, all these territories are populated by people who absolutely hate Russia.
Our village was liberated in 1922 in June. Now there are only 100 of us left, and that's how we live.
That's not how you liberate. We get...
It turned out to be a perfect illustration of the sad saying, "May Putin help you."
The Russian army is systematically destroying the Kursk region, and the rest of the Russians couldn't care less. The people of Kursk have been left at the mercy of looters, Korean mercenaries, and Kadyrov's gangs, and nobody is bothered by it. And the people of Kursk are just trying not to think about it, so as not to ruin their mood before watching Let's Get Married.
Hey there, crazy Pasha.
Whoa!
Hey there!
Totally awesome.
Meeting.
Is getting heated in the studio.
Kursk has practically disappeared from the news agenda. Putin has stopped mentioning it altogether. In January, the cigarette butt remembered Kursk region only once, and that was when he congratulated the employees of the prosecutor's office. Judging by Putin, the Kursk region isn't even part of the Russian Federation. It's mentioned less often than Syria. But Putin comments on Trump and the US-Canada trade wars every day. And he also boasts to the whole world about the latest piece of alternative art from afterwards.
Color palette: black, white, silver dark gray, brighter colors planned, carrot orange, blue red. Vladimir Putin appreciated spark but didn't get behind the wheel. Bye.
Meanwhile, under the radar, Russian aviation is bombing the Kursk region. But for Russians, this is such a routine event that it's not even worth discussing in the kitchen.
Believe me, I swear to you, it's absolutely, well, as you say, I couldn't care less.
In the case of Kursk, Putin is once again acting like an ostrich. Head in the sand, tail to the fan. What's so bad about what I supported? Tell me.
What did you support exactly?
That I supported those ostriches. They couldn't liberate the Kursk region, and they won't be able to anytime soon. That's why Putin pretended the problem didn't exist at all. Kursk? Nope, never heard of it. Is that somewhere in Paraguay?
Where there are lots and lots of wild monkeys living in the forests.
Putin is more concerned about keeping the military base in Tartu, Syria, than about liberating Suja. In reality, Moscow has recognized the Kursk region as Ukrainian territory, and now people from Kursk are just as much enemies to Russia as Ukrainians are. It's their own fault that the Russian army couldn't protect them.
Well, of course, naturally, that's exactly what we're basing everything on. That's what dictates our position. In my opinion, it's completely understandable, clear, and logical.
The attitude toward refugees from the Kursk region in Russia is the same as toward enemies of the people. They've been kept homeless for half a year, and no one intends to help them in any way.
We became homeless in an instant.
We have nothing. We arrived wearing clothes, all left behind. The horse died, the piglets too. So we have nothing left.
My mom ran out of the house. She has only 2 robes. That's it. She has nothing else to wear.
We're renting 1 room for 3 people from appliances. Thank you to the people who at least agreed to just let us pay utilities.
Waiting 10,000 ruble payment. Maybe we'll get it. When those 10,000 come, maybe we'll start living right.
As a result, people in Kursk really started to feel more like Ukrainians and began to protest. The events in Putin's Russia are unbelievable.
First of all, I would like to see those who are the initiators of this action, because this is a public illegal action. You are now being pushed toward illegal actions. In short, I don't know why not. The authorities haven't pushed any of the enemies to the border. But first of all, this is a war, and in this war,
Where's the war?
Declare war.
Declare war. Where is the war? Sing beautifully in a foreign language or fluently.
Russia spends almost $300 million a day on the war. Moscow pays North Korea hundreds of millions of dollars for the soldiers fighting in the Kursk region. But with a straight face, they tell the people of Kursk, there's no money, but hang in there.
There was a time in my life when I remember there was hot water in the house, there was tea to brew with that hot water, and black bread. I remember the sugar we could put in that tea, and that black bread, it was such a treat. The current conditions for refugees, which I see here in Kursk and in other regions, we still need to understand that the harsh conditions we had back then, I don't see those conditions here now. At the same time, the people who are receiving all this still seem to be dissatisfied.
How ungrateful the people of Kursk are, after all. Mother Russia started a war because of which they lost their homes, loved ones, and means of survival. And yet they're dissatisfied with a piece of black bread handed to them with a shovel.
You've been thinking a bit too much of yourselves lately. You've gotten a bit too bold.
The people of Kursk need to understand that their situation won't improve because as far as the Kremlin is concerned, they don't exist. And if they protest too much, they'll just be shipped off en masse to Magadan to chop wood. By the way, the Z-Patriots are already openly saying this. Russia is big, Go off to the taiga, pick berries and make soup out of moss.
People often ask me, why do you always hang out in the forest? What are you doing here? You're not building anything, no dugouts, no huts. Guys, I chase away animals, birds, people, the Yeti, and all sorts of other strange creatures. That's what I'm really doing out here, you know?
The most terrible and shameful thing is that when the Ukrainian armed forces began their operation in the Kursk region, Russian propaganda tried to scare the locals with stories about terrifying Benderits, concentration camps, and Russians having their tongues ripped out.
In fact, there is supposedly direct evidence that militants from the Ukrainian armed forces have set up something like concentration camps in the Russian border areas, where they force local residents who couldn't leave dangerous zones into these camps at gunpoint for various reasons.
Is what she's saying really true?
Where's the truth in that?
Camp.
100%.
Twice.
It's a lie. How can anyone believe him? Tell me, how can anyone believe him?
Well, I don't know. They're your leaders, not mine.
That's why many people from Kursk fled specifically to Russian-controlled territory, supposedly to their own people. But it turned out that over there, they weren't their own at all. They were newcomers, ragged and worse than migrants.
They abandoned all of us. Our leader is a scoundrel, a real bastard. We have no idea where she went.
Meanwhile, those Russians who stayed in Ukrainian-controlled territory are receiving more attention and assistance. They are provided with humanitarian aid, medical care, and protection from looters.
Ironic.
For all other citizens, everything is currently at a complete standstill. I would put it simply, a complete standstill, because the 46 people who arrived in Russia are living proof that Ukrainian soldiers are not fascists, not monsters, as they are portrayed in the Russian Federation's media. People are saying that it was specifically the Ukrainian soldiers who truly helped them survive during that extremely difficult time when they were abandoned by the Kremlin authorities and, to be honest, even by their own relatives.
Even Kremlin officials have started to admit that all the propaganda horror stories about the cruelty of the Ukrainian armed forces are the ravings of a madman. The residents of Kursk themselves testified to the good treatment they received from Ukrainian soldiers.
And when the residents of Kursk, who had been taken by Ukrainian soldiers from the occupied territories to Sumy, and then from Sumy through Belarus to Russia, were finally returned to their homes, they recounted a variety of different stories about their experiences during this difficult journey. They spoke in detail about how Ukrainian servicemen, despite the challenging circumstances and limited resources, brought them their own food and generously shared their very last rations with the people in need. We must not lose our humanity and see them only as an evil empire. They are different.
The Russians did not bomb the boarding school in Suja for no reason. They wanted to intimidate witnesses who might speak positively about Ukrainians and, on the contrary, describe in detail all the crimes of Putin's Reich.
In Russia, as soon as they find out that we say Ukrainians are not mistreating us, they immediately consider us traitors. How could it be otherwise?
But you're telling the truth.
What difference does it make? The government doesn't care. And I don't have the option to return to Russia, because if I do, reporters harass me. Or I don't know.
Do you want to leave?
To Ukraine, yes.
All regions of Russia, using the example of the Kursk region, must finally understand that the Kremlin will not protect them. At the first sign of danger, they will be abandoned and forgotten. Putin, as always, will put on a stone face and claim he has nothing to do with it. The Kremlin, in principle, is not designed to protect Russian citizens, because Russian citizens are a resource, expendable material that is burned to sustain the regime. Why protect and create good living conditions for coal before throwing it into the furnace?
I was raised this way since childhood. For me, it's my country first, then my family and loved ones, then my values, and only after that, my own life. Value system.
Like this, so the phone can't see. We're filming the entire deployment. They record the entire deployment. And the guys have gone on the assault now. They'll go in the evening, well, or in the morning. Now they'll be taken to Kievka and sent off. That's how it is. Good job, guys.
For Putin, 100 more Russians or 100 less doesn't really matter. As long as there are enough for meat assaults, everything's fine. The main thing is that the serfs keep quiet and pretend they like it. And if they start complaining, you can always drop a bomb on them and liberate them.
We can't achieve anything at all, absolutely nothing. We're like zombies. Nobody needs us, absolutely nobody. That's what's really upsetting.
Well, you know, it just feels like we've been cut off and forgotten.
We don't even have water. Honestly, they're just mocking people, that's all. It's not even a settlement anymore. It's just...
I saw it coming.
A garbage dump.
The most astonishing thing is that even the North Koreans were shocked by the inhumane treatment of their own people. When Kim Jong-un learned about the meat grinder assaults and the casualties, he lost 12 kilograms and ordered his troops to withdraw from the front line. In less than a couple of months, an entire Korean division lost a third of its personnel and completely lost its combat effectiveness.
Excellent.
It should be noted that the Koreans were better equipped than the Russian cannon fodder, and they weren't being driven into attacks on crutches.
Infantry done lavishly.
Infantry done lavishly. Russian infantrymen who are being eliminated and captured here in the Kursk region are not provided for nearly as well by the Russian command. They don't get this kind of new weaponry in such quantities. As a rule, Russian infantrymen go into battle. They are given 4 or 5 magazines, and the weapons are far from new. But here, look, he's supplied with as many magazines as he needs.
Can you imagine how many Russian soldiers have died there? Even North Korea is horrified by the cruel treatment of people in Russia. Did you ever honestly think you'd really hear something like that? We once warned Russians that Putin was gradually dragging Russia down to the level of North Korea. We were wrong. Moscow surpassed North Korea long ago. And this is no longer just a warning bell. This is a bell tolling across all of Russia.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.